I feel honored and privileged to be able to address this esteemed committee, and in an effort to reveal truth and justice for not just myself, but for all. In early May of 2019, the FBI launched a full investigation on me. At our trials, rigged so that we could not reveal the criminality of the FBI's actions in our case, they cited three reasons for the investigation. First, anonymous reporting of me illegally possessing firearms. They knew that anonymous reportings are difficult to validate, and as the highest law enforcement of the land, they should have been aware of the governor's pardon that I had received in April of 2019, rendering that claim to be bogus. Secondly, they cited my exercise of First Amendment free speech on social media, which may have been distasteful, but didn't reach the threshold of criminal. And third and most important was information they received from the Dallas field office. I hadn't been in or near Texas in 2019. This was merely retaliatory for my association with Kevin Lindell Massey, a 2014 border defender from Texas who was discovered by federal law enforcement on December 23, 2019 with a gunshot wound to the neck, which they ruled a suicide. They monitored my every move for 8 months, and I hadn't committed any crime. This included warrants for every form of communication I took part in, use of 24-hour physical surveillance teams, and social media informants who had never met me. All to no avail. I hadn't committed any crime. But the FBI was determined to obtain a prosecution against me. Their answer was to send CHSs, or confidential human sources, at me in January of 2020. The term CHS is very misleading. It implies that they are using informants. In Black's Law Dictionary, informant is defined as one who confidentially supplies information to the police about a crime. But what happens when law enforcement knows that there is no crime? The CHS is paid and used as an agent provocateur. The definition of agent provocateur in Merriam-Webster's dictionary is a person hired to infiltrate a group and incite its members to illegal action. The court sealed the discovery information in our case in order to cover up for the FBI. If you investigate this case, I swear before the Almighty God you'll find these words to be true. I apologize and have paid for my intoxicated ramblings that were recorded, but I did not conspire to commit any crime. In 1932, Supreme Court Justice Roberts stated in his opinion, "Courts must be closed to the trial of a crime instigated by the government's own agents." He also stated that preservation of the purity of its own temple belongs only to the court. But what happens when the court shields its eyes from the truth and through its rulings obscures the facts? I want to offer my sincerest gratitude for your obvious pursuit of the righteous truth. If we cannot rely on the judicial and executive branches to serve and protect justice, that awesome responsibility falls on the legislative branch, and all Americans should be encouraged by your efforts to do that. As for myself, and judging by my experience in this case, I feel that you are my only hope for the legitimate finding of fact in this matter. Thank you for hearing from me. God bless and protect the United States of America.
Average people are getting paid with taxpayer dollars to be informants against those very same people and to monitor them and surveil them, you know, and essentially snitch on them and tell the government what the people actually think about them so that the government can justify using their own citizens as pawns in politics, political pawns, in the magnitude of criminality that government agencies conduct on their citizens. She might not ever be able to get to see her son ever again on the outside, you know, because of what the government did to her son. The FBI preyed on Adam Fox like a lion would an elk or a deer, you know? They stalked Adam Fox like a lion would a gazelle. And they all ganged up on Adam Fox, just like the lions do in the wild. You know, when they come across some zebra, they all gang up on that one zebra, or they attack the baby zebra. You know, they try to find the weakest thing that they can find to kill, the easiest target. And that's what the FBI is doing in today's age. Including members of the Wolverine Watchmen and members of the 1st Continental Army, including Adam Fox, Steve Robeson, and specifically the Wisconsin Patriot 3% militia, along with the Null brothers, Brian Higgins, Eric Moltor, and others. So these groups that we're talking about here, like 1st Continental Army, Wisconsin Patriot 3% militia, these were groups that were created by the FBI. These are groups that they are the FBI. You know, their informants are the leaders of these groups. The agents are saying, make a group online, create an event, get people to show up. And then they write in their documents that they've discovered these groups, right? They've discovered these groups during their investigation of their subjects, when in reality, they've directed their actual subjects to specifically create these groups and name them in certain ways. Yeah. To actually put CHS Dan in a leadership role of literally training all of the people at the training events, you know? Because otherwise they can't really just put them up there and have them train everyone every single FTX. So they have to say, oh, well, we had to put him in that training position so he could make sure everyone was safe. And if you look at the data and you rewatch the videos or the audio, not one point in time was there ever a safe place to put your firearms before you went out onto the field. You know, there was never any directions or anything like that from the government to try to maintain safety at all. They allowed very untrained people to run these courses without actually showing them anything. And then all they did was train the other kind of higher level people, to make them look more deadly than they actually are. Training, the CHS frequently asked agents for direction on what weapons tactics were allowed to be taught. Now, this is an absolute lie. You know, the agents said that they advised the CHS to provide instruction to individual members based on their request for assistance while shooting, and to provide general instruction to the group on marksmanship and form. Okay? This is an absolute lie. It's not like, you know, we were showing up and then we were like, hey, will you teach us how to do this? Will you teach us how to do that? We don't know every single, you know, drill there is to know. The reality of the situation was we knew a little bit, but when we came into the FTX, the government already had everything set up and ready to go. We're going to do medical right here. We're going to run this shoot house right there. We're going to run back and forth on these barrels right here. The hanging steel targets are over there. The barrels are here. It's already set up. So when you show up, everything's ready to go. And the range safety officers, I guess, or the trainers in the events are government agents and government informants. You know what I mean? It's not like they're standing around waiting for us to say, hey, should we build a shoot house? Or, hey, should we run this drill? No, they're doing it on their own. And then using that against us to say, oh, well, these guys, they're running this shoot house drill because they wanted to practice assaulting a building, you know, or breaking into a building and killing people. Excuse me. And then when we pointed out, the defense pointed out, like, well, if they're supposed to be breaking in a building and shooting people, why do they have red targets with sad faces and then a bunch of smiley targets that are green? You know, that means that those are friendlies. Those aren't people you should shoot, you know? This isn't something that, people who are training to conduct violence are going to put. If they're terrorists that don't care about human life, why would they put friendly targets, that they shouldn't shoot in the drills that they're running? It doesn't make any sense. And then it also says in here, and this is probably one of the most important things to understand that's in their documentation, is that the CHS was advised that in his role as XO or LT, which is like, a commanding officer, that the CHS was not to initiate any ideas, help develop any attack plans, or help Joe Morrison maintain control of the group. And as we've talked about, that's literally all they did, was try to maintain control of a group that was splintering off into other areas and were no longer associating with each other, and then suggesting, criminal type behavior to conduct against politicians or other people that were aside from the actual conspiracy charge,
Yeah, and here's another thing. It says here that CHSs were advised not to use controlled substances or whatever, and not to participate and stuff like that. But at the same time, they're taking them out to get drunk. They're paying for their food, for their beers, and they're watching these people get stoned. Steve Robson, I believe, did get stoned with these guys. So they're doing things that they're claiming on paper they're not doing, but they're doing the exact opposite of that. So that's just another thing that is interesting here.
Steve Robison was buying ounces of weed and giving it to Barry Croft for free. This is, trying to entice him to smoke and say, the most ridiculous things that people say when they're high on marijuana, and this is the type of behavior that they say on paper that they're not supposed to do. But then when you actually see the evidence for what it is, that's all they're doing, is what they're not supposed to be doing. And these things are recorded. So what that tells you is that there's over 150 bullet points here in these documents.
With nothing illegal.
With nothing illegal happening. And in every single instance, Dan Chappell is the one that's recording it. You have Dan Chappell or Steve Robison who are there recording all of these data points, which shows that it wasn't like they heard about something that was going on. They were there and they created it. They didn't hear about something or an event and then tell the FBI about it. The FBI told them to create the event and go there and then record the event so that they can document it. And there's so many things where, they don't have me calling Adam on here. They don't have any of us calling each other on here in that way. They just have the government informants calling Adam Fox or Barry Croft.
Right. So if Adam Fox was a leader of a group, you'd expect there to be more communication with him and the members of the group he's supposedly leading, and has just consolidated power and control over or whatever, and he's now giving people directives. There's nothing that actually shows any of that happened. An interesting data point here is on June 14th, 2020, there's a phone call between Big Dan Chappell, the government's lead informant, and Adam Fox. This is before Fox is seen at the Capitol protests where other members of the Watchmen were present. So how was Adam first, how did he even come into contact with Dan? Where did that happen at? It's very bizarre, very strange, and no one had met him prior to that. Very interesting.
Was never recorded that they had put in their information, and it has multiple other people as interceptees on this phone call. So what did they do? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, a 6-person triple three-way whatever phone call? That doesn't really make sense. What this tells me is that the government had focused on Adam before Adam ever even was involved with us at all, and actually convinced certain members of the group to actually allow Adam to come to the training property. Yeah, absolutely. The government created that entire meeting, and unfortunately this didn't get to come into the trial, but I had discovered this in the discovery, that there was text messages between FBI agents and other FBI agents, as well as FBI agents to their informants, where their informants are reporting back to them and the agents are reporting to the other agents, where they're literally saying, hey, they're not planning anything. They're not talking about any planning. Like, what do you want me to do here? They're not talking about any planning. Barry Croft is about to leave. You know what I mean? So then you have the FBI, and this is real, man. This is in actual text messages where the government is saying that this is a national attack planning meeting, but then behind the scenes, the FBI agents are texting each other saying, hey, there's no plan here, man. There's nothing actually going on. There's nothing criminal here. We need to get some sort of evidence. Like, we need to get them to talk about a plan or something, because we need that conviction. We need that data. So there's no criminality happening over time here. And what you have is the FBI wanting there to be criminality. They want it to occur. And if the people aren't going to do it on their own, then they're going to have to take over and do it themselves.
Yeah, they admit